Thank you to Minister of State McHugh and Maura Trassa for that very illuminating interview with many insights into the job in hand and what's going on here. So I'm delighted to have been invited to moderate this panel. My name is Alma Choigligh, and I am in the happy position of knowing a good number of you already, having served at our embassy in London twice. I now work in the Trade Division in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and one of the pieces of work that I've been engaged in over the last year since my return to Dublin has been working with a team across government to draw up our trade strategy. Now, in drawing up the strategy, we drew very much from the insights of the diaspora policy, and I was struck repeatedly by the unusual advantage that Ireland has in having taken the time to draw up a diaspora policy that recognises that unique and that important relationship that it exists between Ireland and its diaspora, and deliberately sets out to nurture that relationship and to develop it and to engage the diaspora. Now, in our panel today, which is called Evolving Global Irish Communities, Meeting Their Needs and Identifying Opportunities for Collaboration, I think we have an opportunity to look at the five main goals of the diaspora policy. So to support those who have left Ireland and need or want support, to connect in an inclusive way with those people around the world who are Irish or of Irish descent or have a tangible connection to Ireland and want to maintain that connection with Ireland and with each other. It should allow us to discuss that facilitation, the activity at national and international level to build on and develop international diaspora engagement, and to recognise the wide variety of people who make up our diaspora, the important ongoing contribution that they've made individually and collectively in shaping our development and our identity. And then it's important also that our diaspora policy needs to evolve. It needs to meet changing needs in changing times. So I hope that this panel session will allow us to set the scene in a number of ways for the more focused workshop sessions that will be happening later today and on Friday, including on planning for the diaspora and on new diaspora needs. Time constraints aside, I also would like this to be a really interactive session. So we're going to have a lot of opportunities for inputs from the floor and hopefully develop that conversation that Minister Flanagan and Minister McHugh set out. This is one of our key aims from our discussions here, to start that conversation and to move ourselves in the direction that we need to move. So our first speaker on the panel is Ted Smyth. Now, Ted served as an Irish diplomat for 15 years, working in locations as far apart as Portugal, Geneva, the US and the UK. And his work in the department mainly focused on the then nascent Northern Ireland peace process. He was deeply involved in the New Ireland Forum, which forged the historic consensus which laid the groundwork for the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and following that, the Good Friday Agreement, of course, in 1998. He was Chief Administrative Officer of the H.J. Heinz Company from 2003 to 2009, and subsequently he was Executive Vice President for Corporate Affairs at McGraw-Hill Financial, whose brands include Standard & Poor's and other prominent financial brands, until his retirement in 2015. He also has served on the boards of the Haines Celestial Food Company, the Africa America Institute, and the Ireland Funds. Since his retirement, and I use that word very lightly, he has devoted all of his time and energy to the non-profit sector. And he now serves on the board of Glucksman Ireland House at New York University, Marlborough College, and he's chair of the Clinston Institute in University College Dublin. So I'd like to invite Ted to come up and say a few words to us on the themes of the panel. Thank you.
Alma, a Choigligh ar fuddan down, to as more arm avan shaw. I've been invited to discuss the evolving needs of Irish Americans and how we might enhance engagement with that mighty force of 35 million people. So let's get the hard question out first. Is Irish American identity in crisis? This has been debated at conferences, analysed in books and in the media. Lawrence McCaffrey posed the question in his seminal book, The Irish Diaspora in America, quote, has their trip from Irish Catholic urban neighbourhoods to suburban melting pots been a journey to achievement and contentment, or an excursion from someplace to no place, unquote? Not only is Irish America growing older, but the four traditional pillars of its community are no longer as salient: the Catholic Church, the Democratic Party, the Labour movement, and Irish nationalism. This trend, combined with the fact that there will likely be no replacement generation from Ireland going forward, means that Irish American identity will fade unless Ireland and Irish America find new ways to create a two-way, mutually beneficial relationship. Bottom line, folks, we have a problem, but it's also a huge opportunity, culturally, politically, and economically, as the minister said this morning. The first thing to do is to get better data on who these millions of people are who claim Irish heritage and what it is they value. I want to provide some answers based on research collected in a unique American nationwide survey, the Irish Diaspora Survey, conducted recently. It was conducted in February via a link to subscribers on the irishcentral.com website and generated a sample of 3,180 respondents after a few days. Neil O'Dowd, the visionary Irish media publisher in America, founded irishcentral.com, which now has 4.5 million unique visitors every month. We at Glucksman Ireland House, NYU, partnered with Neil with Amoric Research here from Dublin and with Professor Liam Kennedy from UCD Clinton Institute and designed the survey, which had 51 questions based on focusing on values and interests. Top-line results are as follows. 51% of respondents are third generation and beyond, an impressive result that shows the power of online surveys. 20% are not Irish at all, attracted to Ireland by our culture. The majority check Irish news sites once a day. 85% are interested in studying Irish history and literature if courses are available locally. 75% express huge desire for online distance learning courses on Irish topics. 82% want to make going to Ireland their priority. Now, asked to choose an exemplary Irish American, the top choice was, anybody guess? President John F. Kennedy. Then one of their own family members, then Joe Biden, Cardinal Dolan of New York, Maureen O'Hara, Ronald Reagan, and Liam Neeson. The three top issues they worry about impacting on Ireland are unemployment, financial strain, and Brexit, interestingly enough, with Northern Ireland now down to fourth place. The core of their Irish identity, history, music, literature, genealogy, no surprises there. Billy Lawless, you'll be glad to hear that 68% believe in immigration reform to help the undocumented Irish in the US. But 40% also want tougher immigration restrictions on immigrants to America. In last November's election, 47% voted for Hillary, 27% for Trump, 20% refused to say. We wonder if they're actually shy Trump voters. Also, I have to admit that the largest concentration of respondents turned out to be from three very blue, or as we say in America, Democratic states, New York, Massachusetts, and California. 83% say they have a religion. Of these, 74% are Catholic, 18% Protestant, and 1% Jewish. Guinness is by far the best-known Irish brand, followed by Jameson and Waterford. 66% think Irish citizens abroad should have a vote in Irish presidential elections. Now, this was a very highly educated sample, with 93% having a college education. 42% earn at least $80,000 a year and higher, much higher, I must say, than the American median household income, which is about $57,000 per annum. Now, these answers suggest a number of ways to foster the Irish-American identity in the 21st century, such as greater use of the internet to drive engagement, investment in additional Irish and Irish-American study centres at American universities, including online distance learning, cheaper airfares, and a more enhanced engagement when people come to Ireland. This, unfortunately, Minister, will require a greater investment of resources by the Irish government and its consulates and agencies in Irish America, particularly in what Irish Ambassador Anne Anderson calls, quote, a meaningful set of next-generation projects through cultural and sporting links through educational and exchange visits to Ireland, unquote. Apart from Irish Central, 23% of respondents went to Facebook most often for news about Irish America, followed by irishtimes.com, well done, Ciara, and then Google, and then RTE. It's worth noting that despite the concerns regarding a disconnect between Ireland and Irish America, the gap between Irish American and Ireland was wider due to the lack of daily news and information. Today, social media connects us all around the world in a very rapid way. Now, the data from this survey overwhelmingly indicate that culture is the medium through which a future authentic relationship will be sustained with Irish America. And I'd like to recognize those who've supported Irish studies and the arts up to now in America, great institutions in New York University, Notre Dame, Boston College. But where's the next generation of Loretta Glucksmans, Brian Burns, Don Keogh going to come from to support even more of these? Well, the answer is the Irish Arts Centre in New York. Niall Connolly is with us today. He's a great example of a new cultural centre which will be a model for other cultural centres around the world. Final question for all of you. How important is it for these folks to visit the homeland? The answer varies. 37% of the sample has visited Ireland 5 or more times. Tourism Ireland plays a major role in creating a transformational experience for Irish Americans who visit Ireland. 1.6 million visitors came from North America to Ireland in 2016. An estimated 1/3 were Irish American. So how can we make visiting Ireland even more meaningful for these visitors and others from other parts of the world to ensure their children want to come back regularly and engage in Irish cultural activities and studies in the countries they live in? Don Keogh suggested that every member of the Irish diaspora would be given a card stating something to the effect: I visited my homeland as a member of the Irish diaspora and once again fell in love with our homeland and our Irish heritage. Every time a person visited Ireland, a star could be added recording how many times they've visited. Now, an email could also be sent to them from the minister here, thanking them for coming to Ireland. Wouldn't that be nice? It wouldn't be a hard thing to do because most people give their email when they're going to Ireland, either to their travel agent or to, I think the passport office may have it as well. We need to check in on that. In addition, we should build on the gathering, so well conceived by Tim O'Connor. We should build on the 2016 and Creative Ireland programs. Congratulations to John Kincanna's work on these. Economically, the increased investment by Tourism Ireland, by the IDA, and by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is creating two-way benefits for Irish American Ireland. The IDA added 25 new people, DFA opened new consulates in Austin and Atlanta, and the outcomes are obvious. More inward investment from the American South, growing Irish arts, sporting and cultural events, more tourism from these regions. Americans see Ireland as a friendly and supportive place to trade in Europe, and connecting with the rich and intriguing Irish heritage enriches their lives. Politically, the Irish have never been as powerful, playing a major role at federal and state levels in both major parties. We now are an important swing vote in American elections. Finally, as a follow-up to this forum, I hope the embassy and consulates and Irish agencies in America will host workshops with Irish American organizations to expand on and implement the ideas and proposals that emerge here. In closing, I want to thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Minister for the Diaspora for hosting this great forum. I also want to commend Niall Burgess, Anne Derwin, and the dynamic Irish Abroad team. Thank you, and I look forward to our panel discussion.
I'd like to thank Ted for those data-rich insights. I'm not sure whether the Minister's inbox is going to be able to stand all those emails. He's going to be sending 1.6 million every year. And today, for the second panellist is Ant Hanlon. Now, Ant, I'd like to express our special thanks to Ant for having agreed to step in at short notice to join our panel. Ant is the Chief Executive of Leeds Irish Health and Homes and has been since 1996. Leeds Irish Health and Homes offers a range of support services to members of the Irish community and beyond in Leeds. It offers housing support for people with mental health needs, practical and emotional support for older Irish people, and it's developing a focus on Irish people experiencing memory loss and dementia. Ant was also the chair of an organisation called Volition Leeds, which is a network of over 90 members of the voluntary not-for-profit sector in Leeds that support mental health and well-being there. He also served as treasurer of the Federation of Irish Societies, which is now known as Irish in Britain, for 9 years until 2008. So we look forward to Ant's insights on the Irish community in the UK in the context of this panel. Thanks, Ant.
Thank you and good morning, and thank you, Alma. God, you know a lot about me. It's a bit frightening. I'd like to thank Alma for offering Leeds Irish Health and Homes and me the opportunity to speak to you this morning. The brief is around evolving needs in Britain. But obviously, I wanted to talk from the perspective of my organisation and maybe my community in Leeds, and then expand it to the wider Irish community. As Minister Flanagan said this morning, this is a massive time of change for the Irish in Britain. It's a time of uncertainty, and as people have often said, the only certain thing at the moment is uncertainty. We've talked about the effect of Brexit and the great unknown there, but that creates worries for Irish charities in Britain about their future, their access to funding, but it also creates worries for the community and especially vulnerable people in the community, especially around whether they'll be expected to leave Britain or remain. The Emigrant Support Programme funding, which Leeds Irish Health and Homes have access to and for which we remain very grateful, is a much needed foundation for organisations in Britain. It allows them to have the basis for trying to lever in other funds, and I would make the plea that the Emigrant Support Programme recognises that role that they have with it, with many of the Irish organisations in Britain, and not to forget the massive debt that is owed to those people for whom we serve, in that they were the people that sent back remittances throughout the generations and kept Ireland afloat in many instances. The profile of the Irish community, it's an older community in Britain. The standard profile of the community is like a tree with the older people at the top and younger people very much at the bottom. For the Irish in Britain, it's an inverse community. There's more older people than there are younger people and people coming through, and that obviously has an impact on the community itself and on their support needs. The profile is one of many health inequalities, especially around the Irish people's public health, higher rates of cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, cardiovascular disease, dementia, things like that. One of the difficulties is around getting statutory organisations to do anything about that, because the community is 600,000 and throughout Britain, and it means that often you're dealing with small numbers of people. However, they're often people in the most chronic need. I think it's important to raise at this point that for many Irish organisations and for many Irish communities, the worry is what would happen to those people if we weren't there as organisations, because the worry is that those people wouldn't get support. There was a question to Minister McHugh this morning about the Emigrant Support Programme and the impact of the funding that it has on the community. And we were talking as a team yesterday, and one of my workers said to me, told a story of a woman who had not been out of the house for 2 years, and the worker had worked with her, now engaged her in an art class. She goes to a lunch group and she's starting to do some volunteering, and she actually said, Leeds Irish Health and Homes has saved my life. And I thought, what greater impact can there be of some funding than to save somebody's life? So the emerging needs as I see them, and I think from talking to and knowing other Irish organisations throughout Britain, I see many commonalities. As Alma mentioned, we've started a dementia service recently to provide support, culturally sensitive support, to Irish people with dementia. Dementia is a big and a growing need within the Irish community. It's a growing need for the communities throughout Britain anyway, but specifically for the Irish community, having that culturally sensitive approach when people are in need. Social isolation, often as the older generation, they tend to be more likely to be single, maybe living in circumstances where they don't get to see people. So our role is to combat their social isolation. As we'll have today in one of the panels, mental health is, you know, it's talked about, it's acknowledged now, but for the Irish community, mental health has been a difficulty for a long time. Funding for Irish organisations wanting to support our community, as I've said, with the worry about Brexit, we're finding it harder and harder to access funding through charitable trusts, through statutory routes, and so the worry is for many Irish organisations is whether they'll be there in 4 or 5 years' time. We've also got issues around diversity. As has been recognised today, the Irish community is not a homogenous community. We have things like, you know, we've got the LGBT communities, mixed race Irish, people with a shared heritage. You know, we've got the Twitter, the recent Twitter feed, which is We Are Irish, showing the diversity across the Irish community. And that will be both in Ireland and in Britain, in the Irish community in Britain. Volunteerism. You know, many of our organisations rely heavily on volunteers, but a lot of our Irish volunteers are getting older themselves and maybe are in need of support. So it's how we get the younger Irish community to come to us and support us with their volunteering. We have shared histories with other migrant groups within Britain, and I think that's something to be exploited. We're working with a group called the Black Health Initiative in Leeds around, they work with the African Caribbean community, and we're doing some joint work about developing responses to dementia. When I listen to stories from their community, they're very similar to stories from our community. We've got issues for travellers, the people from the travelling community, for prisoners, for survivors of abuse from the institutions. Government changes are massive, not only with Brexit, we've got internal benefits changes, and for many of the Irish community, they feel lost within the system. And it's our job as Irish organisations to support them through those systems changes and make sure that they get the support they need. I think it's also important to recognise that for many Irish people, especially people coming over to Britain, their traditional routes into the Irish community are going. Our younger Irish people don't come and access the churches or Irish centres anymore. Their routes into the community are very different. So we need to be thinking more, how do we get younger Irish people to support our organisations and the community in general. We need to be looking more towards Irish businesses and the business community, as Minister McHugh was saying today about the event tonight. Many of us, I'm a social work background, I'm not a business person. I find it hard to talk to business people because I don't know what they want to say. What I want to say to them is, I need your support to help our organisation. But, you know, we need, as Minister McHugh again was saying, you know, just keep talking. I think one day, hopefully, I'll start to be able to give the message that connects with somebody that then starts to support, because we've got to support our community as a wider community. It's all of our responsibilities. The mark of a great society is how it looks after its vulnerable. And with the Irish community, I think we do that so well, but we could do it better. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ant, for that look at the changing profile of the Irish community in Britain and their changing needs and the emerging needs that we very much wanted to get to the heart of in this discussion. So our final speaker from a very different Irish community is Colette Shannon. Colette is the head of communications at Spinney's, which is one of the largest and most successful food supermarkets in the UAE. She moved to the UAE in 2008, and before that she had been a trade marketing specialist for Bord Bia, which is the Irish semi-state organisation which promotes Irish food and agricultural exports. So she's a very active member of the Irish Business Network in Dubai, and she created the Taste of Ireland Green Box competition, which is another one of those ideas that we could perhaps spread around the world a little bit more. It saw 12 of the UAE's most prestigious restaurant brands take part in a cooking competition, promoting the very best of Irish ingredients, as well as building those Irish-UAE relations. So Colette, please.
As they say, going on a trip, I started early. Good morning to you all, and Minister and friends of the Global Irish. Dubai, 9 million residents, 200 nationalities, the world's biggest shopping mall, the world's tallest hotel, the first Minister of Happiness, and all year-round sunshine. And as a Mayo girl, that is very welcome. So it's no wonder I call it home, and where my 2 children were born. It is just one of those very exciting places. And I suppose a little bit of that glamour is very alluring, and it has made home for the largest resident Irish community in the Gulf, with 8,000 registered officially. Now, we do believe that the number is significantly higher than that. Those are the ones that are actually recorded, but we believe there's a lot of non-registered visa residents there, and they do what we call border runs. So I suppose in some ways they're the new undocumented, and they exit the country every 30 days. But they could be doing business out of Dublin or out of Ireland and coming back and forth and running their business there, but they're not officially registered. We do know, however, that the embassy in Abu Dhabi, in terms of the number of passports issued last year, was double that in 2011. So definitely the numbers are growing. It is, the country is buzzing, it's very young, it's dynamic, but I think with that comes a lot of loneliness as well, because it is so flash, because it's a little bit false in many ways. It puts a lot of pressure on people to be better, and I suppose in terms of the honesty of really what you're achieving, it's hard, and it's hard for a lot of people, but the 8,000 registered, and I'd say well over 10,000, maybe closer to 12,000 Irish people that are there. I'm very happy to have Nolene sitting down there, who's been a much longer resident than I have in Abu Dhabi. They're very well respected and very well connected. I think that's part of our natural networking that the Minister referred to earlier. And we're doing our bit in terms of bringing the communities together. There are different clubs and societies in Dubai and in the wider region. The Dubai Irish Society was set up over 40 years ago. Please bear in mind that the country itself was only 45 years old. So, it just goes to show how long we've been out and how long we've been travelling the world. The Dubai Celts, as we know, in 1996, where the Minister himself was part of the founding group for there. And they play both men and women very regularly on a weekly basis, obviously, their training. And then the Irish Business Network, which is one that I'm most active in, as mentioned, full-time job and 2 small children, so you have to manage your time. So the Business Network suits me, and it suits my expertise in terms of being able to add some value to that. All of the networks have open dialogue, and obviously they're similar in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain and Qatar and across the region. And it's about encouraging us all to work together. You know, UAE itself is such a small country. It's sad in some ways that we have separate groups for all of them, but there is very much an open dialogue. Having been a member of the Business Network since it started, we felt that we have monthly meetings and we have morning meetings because the working days itself are very long, so we generally start about 7:30, and we're very lucky that the ambassador, Pat Hennessy, attends every one of those breakfast meetings. It's very important to have that face there for us to all connect with. And it's an opportunity for Irish businesses looking to do work in the UAE to come and do an elevator pitch. It's also good for those of us that are working in our industries to also talk about what we're doing and to open up the network for the new people coming in, because it's such a popular place now for young people to go to. Alma referred to the green box competition. I have a background in food. I'm a farmer's daughter. I love food. I eat a lot of it, as you can tell. And it was for me, working in a supermarket, working in the food industry, was how do I raise the profile of Irish food? Because I'm extremely passionate about Irish and particular Irish food. So we started with this green box competition just to get people excited. And to walk into a hall in one of the most beautiful hotel, the Ibn Battuta, which is almost like a cathedral, and we had 12 of the top restaurants, each and every one of in the alcoves of each one, the Burj Al Arab, the Zabil Zarai, all of those really top brands, all working with Irish food. And then the winning thing was to come back to Ireland and to actually go and meet the growers and the producers and the farmers and visit Ireland. And that is a memory that will stay with them for a very long time. But it gave us a hook from a media perspective to really start talking about Ireland and putting us on the map in such a market. I'm married to a Scotsman, but both of my children have Irish passports. I'm much more organised than he is, and I got in there first. And I do hope to retire to Mayo. We have a house there, and I'd like to return there someday. I'm not sure how I'll cope with the rain. So returning to Ireland is a choice for me. EU passport holder, I can go anywhere really. And, in terms of my pension is offshore, so, I can draw it down for wherever I am. However, staying in the UAE is not a choice after retirement because you need to have a visa. And that's something, as more and more people are moving out there, is to consider coming back. The age of retirement is 60. So, what happens to us at the age of 60? Where are we going to go to? What's attracting us back to Ireland as opposed to any place else? And it's something to be mindful of people moving out to the UAE as well, is that all non-UAE citizens must have a visa and to live there. And you must have a resident visa and you must have a working visa if you want to work there. And, that's important. It's relatively easy to do that. There is cost involved if you want to put your own visa and set up in a free zone. But it's also important to note that you must have a marriage certificate if you're going to live together as a couple. You must have an alcohol license if you're going to drink alcohol. And it's the same as having a driver's license here. Nolene and I had a quick chat earlier. It's just that respect as well, and not to abuse it, because it's such I suppose in many ways a liberal and a relaxed country. We kind of forget, but that's the law, and it's the same way here. And when you see the headlines, particularly in the British tabloids of people getting arrested for doing various things, you get arrested anywhere in the world if you did those kind of things. So it's important to remember that. So my advice to any new people looking to move out to the UAE is to do your homework and to really understand the do's and don'ts, and don't be fooled by the 7-star hotels and the free-flowing champagne brunches that we have on a Friday. We don't have them every week. They are available every week, but we don't attend them every week. The streets are not paved with gold, and the basic working week is 50 hours. So you work hard, and yes, you will get rewarded as well, but also the types of jobs. Last week, we have a Facebook page, the Dubai Irish Exchange, and somebody posted on that. She and her husband wanted to move out, and he was a digger driver and wanted to know what kind of a salary he would get. And it brought us, in some ways, a smile to my face, and also a certain amount of sadness. Digger drivers in the UAE spend about 60 hours a week in heat. Maybe it goes up to 50 degrees in the summer. And I'd say the average wage, Nolene, you might be able to correct me, it's a couple of €100 a month. And, it's not something that most Irish people would be willing to move back to the UAE for. So just, to be realistic, you are limited in some of the jobs that you can get. And it's never been so easy to travel back and forth, and to really check it out before you go. There's a lot of teachers moving out, and they're very, very well respected in the schools there, and many of them signed limited contracts before they head out. And in the fine print of those limited contracts states that you must stay for at least 2 years. So if a company is investing in your visa, they expect a certain amount of loyalty in return. And breaking a contract is, it has consequences, and within that, in terms of being able to get another job anywhere else, moving out, people sign up and say, oh, I'm going to go to Ras Al Khaimah. They don't know where Ras Al Khaimah is. They think it's Dubai, and it's not. And they say, oh, sure, I'll just change jobs. It's not that easy to do that, because the company has invested in it for you. So it also affects our reputation as Irish employees there. So I think it's important to do that. And I mentioned the Dubai Irish Exchange. There's about 3,000 members on that. And so it's a great place to start and ask for the advice. Things like rent. When I moved out there 10 years ago, and it's similar today, but you have to pay a year's rent up front. And I remember thinking, we moved into what we call a villa. It's a 2-bedroom house. It's just a fancy term for a house. And, it was the best part of €20,000. And I remember saying to my husband, God, if I had €20,000, do you think I'd be moving to the UAE? I'd be delighted. And so you immediately have to get into a bank loan to get that. And, it kind of ties you in. So these things you have to be mindful of. Yes, a lot of jobs will help you out with your rent, and they would deduct it then on a monthly basis from you. But that's not everybody, and I guess salaries are getting a lot more competitive now. There's not all of those glory jobs anymore. The other thing, I suppose, living in the Middle East is culture. And although I think there's a lot of the values that we share are very similar with the Arabs, and the importance of family in particular. But we're coming into Ramadan, which is a month of fasting and reflection. The date is selected on the sighting of the moon, but it's expected to start around the 25th, 26th of May. And because the UAE is relaxed, it's still a Muslim country, and the culture and the traditions must be respected. And those are things like no eating and drinking in public before sunset, no loud music. There's no live music at all during the month. Arabic is the national language, however, English is accepted. And I suppose that brings me down to schooling concerns for me as a mother of 2, and what happens to me when I return home, and what happens to all of us when we return home. The lack of Irish being taught in the schools. There are lots of people who do that on a voluntary basis. There's Irish dancing classes as well, and the children are signed up to do that. But also coming back as a university graduate, as an overseas, being classed as an overseas student, although holding an Irish passport and coming back a couple of times a year on holidays, and obviously spending here and maybe having a house, we're treated the same as any other overseas, which opens up different countries for us to go. But how do we track back the young Irish diaspora? I'm very proud to fly the flag for Ireland in the UAE, and I believe we all have a job to play as ambassadors in whatever way. I think there's just starting in terms of what we can do. Food is very much on the radar, but I think in terms of clothes, there's all sorts of arts, crafts, all of that could really be put on the shelves in the UAE. And I think we need to work together and strengthen our ties. And I've learned so much already in the 24 hours that I've been home, and I really look forward to challenging and contributing to policy making in the future to really bring Irish people home that want to come home. And also to ensure that we continue to raise the profile of Irish people and make them welcome in the 4 corners of the world. So I look forward to your questions and sharing any further insights. So thank you very much.
I hope these microphones should be working now. And just to recap on where we are time-wise, we had initially hoped to finish this discussion in about 6 minutes' time. So what I'm going to do is arbitrarily extend it to 11:25, so that will still leave everybody a good 20 minutes for networking and conversation. But I think having heard those 3 really differing perspectives on what it's like to be a member of an Irish community in a different region. I'd like to take maybe some questions from the floor that I can then put to the panel for further discussion. I mean, one of the things that occurred to me in listening to you is about those differing generations of Irish people. So whether you're kind of 10 years deep, which makes you a lifer in Dubai, or whether you're several generations deep, and how we connect with them in the US, and how we bring the younger and the older communities in Britain together. That's a theme that I think came across very strongly in your three contributions. And maybe if there are any questions from the floor on that evolving Irish community angle, who'd like to? I think I see Sarah Owen from Crosscare. So Sarah, there's a roving mic on its way to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers. That was a fascinating discussion, particularly Colette, very interested to hear about the evolving communities in Dubai. I'm Sarah Owen, I work for Crosscare Migrant Project. The Minister, thank you again for writing the foreword for our new report, Home for Good. You may have all got a copy. There's copies upstairs at the reception. We launched it yesterday. You mentioned about returning to Ireland. This report is about the experiences of 400 Irish people who have come home in the last 2 years, and it details the challenges that they've faced. It also talks about the benefits of coming home and why people are coming home. And 83% of the 400 who responded to our survey said that family was the main motivation for coming home. They're coming home to be close to their family, close to their friends, to have a stronger sense of being Irish and reconnecting with their roots. Challenges faced, however, and the Minister has mentioned this, insurance, difficulty finding employment in some cases, delays when it comes to finding accommodation, particularly in Dublin. I mean, these are challenges that affect a lot of people who haven't emigrated, but I think it's important to state that if people are coming back to Ireland and they want to do so, they mustn't be disadvantaged by the fact that they have lived abroad. So I'd be interested in hearing from the panelists, from yourself, Ted, and Ant as well, just about what we're hearing from groups, particularly in the States and in Australia, but also further afield and in the UK, about people considering a move home, and whether you have any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Are there any other questions from the audience just on the evolving communities question? I think I see. Is that Jerry? Yeah. Malumbi?
Nice to see you again, Alma. What I liked was a variation of stories from different parts of the world. The experience of being Irish abroad depends on where you are. The contrast from America and Dubai. So I can only speak my own experience of being Irish in Britain, and I think we should develop more, and it is happening. But Ant was talking about involving the younger people and getting more expertise into the committees and volunteers, is to work and build on our connections with the GAA, which is so big in Britain and throughout the world. Musicians like Chris, and others who come to Britain, they could get involved in reminiscence, and so GAA, using our culture to engage with younger people to help organisations like ANT. Thank you.
Sally Mulready. Sally, I should remind people, even if I recognise you, can you please identify yourself and your organisation again? Thank you.
I just have two very small questions. Sorry. Two small questions. My name is Sally Mulready. I work in... Sorry, I've forgotten what I am. I'm the director of the Irish Elderly Advice Network. I'm also appointed to the Council of State by the President of Ireland. I just wanted to ask two questions. One, is the influence, the political influence that the Irish have enjoyed in America for so long, is it under Trump declining? Is it going to decline? What is the political influence now? Is it in crisis? And my question to Anton is pretty similar. Brilliant speech, Anne. Is the lack of political influence that we have in the UK in terms of the Irish community? I mean, we're in there in Westminster, but not in any way as connected as they have been in America and is there a lesson for us to learn that? Is there, should we be concerned? I mean, Theresa May's utterances in terms of the Irish community have not given any real indication that the special status that Irish people had in the UK will remain. She hasn't said it's going, but she hasn't said it'll remain either. So they're my questions.
Thank you very much, Sally. I think I'll come back to the audience once I've given the panel the opportunity to respond to those three very interesting questions. So, looking at the evidence base for returning to Ireland, is there, what should be happening abroad, what should be happening at home? Just if you can bring your insights from your local experience. Then the GAA and culture, is that the cross-generational reach? Does that hold true, though, in, say, for example, in the US? Is that reach the same there? And then Sally's question on political influence. So who'd like to go first? Can I?
Well, those are all great questions. Could engage us for some time. I think in all humility, I'd have to say that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to the Irish diaspora. And each of us will have to have a different focus. The great thing about today and what the Minister and his team have done is bring us all together so we can share best practices. But having said that, I think what we're doing in Irish America is much different. For example, one of the questions we asked was likelihood to retire to Ireland of respondents, and the answer was very likely 4%, fairly likely 13%, and then the rest were fairly unlikely or very unlikely. So when people go to, in the past, when Irish people went to America, they went to stay. People who went to Britain, the old cliche is they weren't sure if they were staying, and they didn't have to make the same commitment. What's different today is that the Irish who go to America, not the ones who went in the 80s, but the new Irish, are the sojourner Irish, as they're called. And they're going for experience, as the speaker said earlier, and going for experience all over the world. So there is no replacement generation. And to our speaker over here, that's a problem in terms of the power of the Irish American community in elections. And you asked the question, if I could bridge to that now, where's the power under Trump? Well, actually, what that demonstrated to the Democrats is they can't take the Irish vote for granted. Hillary Clinton had the opportunity to go and speak at Notre Dame, turned it down, thinking she didn't have to worry about that. Big mistake. You had the people who were the Reagan Democrats, Republicans, who are a lot of Irish. Now you have the Trump Democrats. So it's a 50-50 vote, I think, right now, and particularly a lot of working-class Irish Americans voted for Trump. So we're in this swing position. And even when the Taoiseach was in the White House, and we do own the White House in St. Patrick's Day, no other country has that access. When the Taoiseach was in the White House, President Trump had to stand on the side and take his little bit of a ribbing from the Taoiseach without getting too upset, because he knew that there were a lot of Irish Americans out there who respected the Taoiseach. He didn't have to pay the same respect to the Chancellor of Germany, and didn't shake her hand or whatever in the White House. But so it demonstrates the power the Irish have. And that's something is really important, economically, politically, and culturally. And we can't neglect that. But if we don't work it hard, and everybody's got their own patch to argue here in Dubai and Leeds and so forth, but if we don't look out for this, this will fade and will be like the Italian Americans, where there'll be some nostalgia on St. Patrick's Day, and that will be it. So we have to work really hard at ensuring that the next generation of people, in third, fourth, and fifth generation, young people, are engaged. And I haven't really answered the question how you engage the young people, but obviously culture and music and movies and online stuff are ways to do it. But sorry, that was a long answer.
Thank you. Colette, would you like to?
I suppose to talk about engagement, for the Easter Rising commemorations, there was the Madinat Jumeirah Theatre was full of Irish people, and it was such a moving thing. And my husband went with me, and he was like, my goodness, for the Irish to be able to bring this together in the UAE is unbelievable. But it really brought people together, and I do think that the GAA are another great tool to get the young people in. Through the business sector, we have a young entrepreneur group as well, and we're trying to bring them in. But it is very difficult because, in terms we're so connected, but not connected at the same time. You know, it's all on social media, it's all there, and we think we're talking all the time, but actually we're really not. We're not sitting around, and this is a forum like this is fantastic to be able to sit down. And I think there's a lot more we can do, particularly through being more mindful of what people are going through, particularly when they look to go home. You know, how the stresses, and I think living in the UAE has a certain amount of stress as well because of the uncertainty, and that brings on a lot of where do you go, who do you talk to, and because it's such a young country, so diverse, 200 different nationalities in a very small massive land, it's difficult, but I think getting the young people involved and active is hugely important.
And it's good to hear that the 2016 celebrations worked well in that space, that they gathered people together. And I think, Ant, that was your experience in. Sorry, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but how did that engagement work in your experience in the UK?
I suppose. I was thinking that Leeds Irish Health and Homes and a lot of charities now are moving towards what is called asset-based community development, which is that we hold the solutions to difficulties within our communities, and it's about sharing that responsibility and looking to who in our community we can use as assets. So around engaging with businesses, professionals, actually, how can you help people in your community so that you've got an almost a constant revolvement and involvement of people who want to develop the community and responses to the community. So that's where we're working towards, and I think part of the Global Irish Conference, actually what that highlights to me is how effective communities are throughout the world, Irish communities are throughout the world, so yeah.
And that's certainly one of the themes that'll be picked up in the workshops later in the forum.
Yeah.
So
I was sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just in terms of moving home. I think the experiences that we've learned more about is that need for information, and for people to come back with a realistic expectation of what life is going to be like in Ireland, and having that information to hand. I remember when Safe Home was first developed, and lots of people in Leeds were saying, yes, I want to sign up to it, but actually the reality for people landing here was very different. And I think that organisations like Safe Home and Migrant Cross Care are invaluable at being able to tell the realistic story for people who want to make that choice. Obviously, for many people coming back, I know my own family who've come back, it's been a very good experience, but employment, health, all of those things need to be thought about.
And that goes equal, as I know this is a point that Colette was making about before going somewhere, making sure that you have that information as far as you can. Now, another thing, just in terms of needs that I picked up across the three, I'm trying to find common threads between the three of you, was the question of loneliness, of engagement with others, and how important that is to communities in all of your locations. And I was wondering if I could take maybe two quick questions from the audience on the theme of needs and whether those needs are changing as well as the Irish community is changing. That gentleman over there.
Good morning, Austin Camerton, Irish Radio Canada. On the question of needs and changing, one of the things that I wanted to reflect on and that you would think about was that in the past, many of the Irish community came from rural Ireland and arrived into what were Irish centres, be it New York, be it Chicago, Boston. And we always talk of that, or Toronto or Vancouver. But with the change, many of the Irish are now going to Dubai or to Silicon Valley. Yeah. And they are a different breed in many ways. So consequently, the concept of coming back, particularly to consider coming back to rural Ireland, considering so many from rural Ireland have moved to Dublin, that whole dynamic has changed. Would you have any comment on any aspect of that?
Thank you for that question. And one gentleman back here. Yeah, green tie.
Dennis J. Buckley, Irish and Europe Association, Brussels headquarters. I take into note the concerns of our American experiences where they feel the the Irish presence in America has been diluted. And here's a situation of 40 million Irish out of a population of 320 million. We in Europe have 250,000 Irish passport holders out of a population of 700 million. And here's our challenge, is that we can create Irish communities. We aim to create Irish cultural communities, because that is the only way we can help Irish on the ground with the support of the locals and other cultures to make events viable and support Irish in these thinned down communities. My question is, how can we adapt the experiences of America with their experience in growing since the days of the Irish-American Culture Institute, all this ground-speaking work that was done, and great work, and translate that into Europe to meet the challenges not only of Brexit, but to assist the Irish on the ground to grow the relationship?
Thank you very much. So I'll turn to the panel on those two again. So, you know, what that question about adaptation and whether the cultural experiences and the idea of promoting culture can be that bridge for us in terms of adapting to some of the political challenges that we're facing. And then the question of where that urban-rural divide and how we can encourage, this is a return question, I think, about how to encourage people to come more home into rural communities as well as into urban ones. So, Ant, what do you have insights on the cultural side, maybe?
I suppose that the culture, from being a second-generation Irish person living in Britain, the difficulty is that we don't really have an identity like in America. You're Irish American. In Britain, I'm regard myself as Irish in Britain. When I come to Ireland, I'm English, and so that sense of identity and who you are and what that means, and obviously for like children, third, fourth generation, that and I'm I'm not sure in terms of Dubai, and it's probably not had that length of time, but how people hold on to their Irishness, but are part of the country that they live in as well, and proudly can be both. Whereas sort of me growing up, I didn't have a choice. I was Irish, and that was it. So it's a strange one.
Colette?
Just following on from what Ant was saying, in the UAE, I suppose it's you have to make a concerted effort to integrate, I suppose, in many ways, and to experience the local culture. And I think part of the worry might be that we spend too much time with ourselves, and in terms of the Irish or the British or the Europeans spending time together and not actually being part of the community and contributing where you're living. And I mentioned with the first state minister for happiness, and that is the understanding there of the fact that there's a very small population of nationals, and then a lot of people who would have built the country, and they're acknowledged that, living there and finding it difficult, and what happiness means in terms of whether that's down to your income, your well-being, your physical health, and all of that, and really working together. And I think as a do before you come to Dubai, and a do while you're there living in the UAE, is to get involved with the local culture. Be very proud of where you come from, but get involved in the local culture as well. Dubai is my second stint. I was 3 years in London. I never thought I would leave London. I absolutely loved it. But and I was very active in the Irish community there, part of the Mayor of London St. Patrick's Festival, and doing a farmer's market in Covent Garden is still one of the highlights of my career. But I think, and I regret after 10 years living in the UAE that I don't speak Arabic. My husband is now doing classes, and he's fairly good at it. But I think it's important as an Irish community, if we want to build the ties with with the local region that we're living in, that maybe as well as offering Irish classes, which I think would be really important, and right now they're on a voluntary basis, but also to encourage the Irish people to start immersing themselves in doing Arabic lessons for the Irish as well. I think it would be really, really good, and I think it would be a good standing for the future people coming to the region, because I think at a very high level, the Irish are so well known, and we're very lucky to have people in very, very high places. And we mentioned Seamus Byrne earlier, Colin McLaughlin, Ger Lawless. You know, these names are so well known in the UAE, and but I think we should really respect where we are as well.
Thank you. And just building on what building on what Colette and Ant have just said, we should be branding not just Ireland, but also branding the hyphenated Irish abroad. So to the question about Europe, an Irish European, like an Irish American, should stand for certain values of inclusion, of social justice, of collegiality, the things we stand for in Ireland. You've seen the Brand Ireland TV documentary. I watched it at 2 o'clock in the morning flying over on Aer Lingus. It captured the attraction of Irishness as a choice because it's chic and it's sexy and it's vibrant and it's young. And that's, talking about getting young people engaged. It's Bono, it's Riverdance, it's Irish Castles, it's a Mist of Time. So we've got something great going on here in Ireland. And we need to brand that, whether it's Irish Australian, Irish European, Irish Dubai, Irish American. And let's take that on the road and show people that when it comes to refugees from Syria or wherever in the United States, when we had the fantastic session, 2,000 people showed up in a cathedral in New York on St. Patrick's Day night for the Irish Stand. It wasn't an anti-Trump thing. It was an affirmation of being Irish, that we are for inclusion. People who had never come together before, I was standing in line for about half an hour waiting to go in. I was talking to people who had never done an event like this before and just wanted to come out. And they had, they were second or third or fourth generation. And it was really, it was inspiring.
Thank you very much. And I'm very sorry to say that we have actually come to the end now of our time for this discussion. We're now going to go away and own our hyphens, Ted. Yes. Own all of those Irish hyphen everywhere else that we are. But thank you so much for your engagement in this session, and thanks to our lovely panel.